It's 1970. The world is in the midst of the Cold War, and the Middle East is a region of intense geopolitical interest. In Syria, a significant event is about to unfold that will change the course of its history. A military takeover happens in Syria. The country, already unstable from years of political turmoil, sees yet another shift in power. This coup is different though. It is meticulously planned and executed by a group of military officers who are determined to bring about a new order. A young and ambitious Air Force officer, Hafez al-Assad, takes charge. Born in 1930 in the small village of Kardaha, Assad had risen through the ranks of the military with a combination of strategic acumen and political savvy. His background in the Air Force gave him a unique perspective on both military and political strategy. Assad, part of a smaller religious group called the Alawites, quickly makes his power strong. The Alawites, a minority in the predominantly Sunni Muslim country, had long been marginalized. Assad's rise to power was not just a personal victory, but also a significant moment for his community. He used his position to elevate other Alawites to key positions in the government and military, ensuring a loyal base of support. He creates a one-party government, stops anyone who disagrees with him, and pushes his rivals aside. The Ba'ath Party, which espoused a mix of Arab nationalism and socialism, became the sole political force in the country. Assad's purges were ruthless, targeting anyone who posed a threat to his rule. Political opponents were imprisoned, exiled, or worse. He says he's a supporter of Arab unity and a protector against Israel. In his speeches, Assad positioned himself as a champion of the Arab cause, calling for unity among Arab nations and resistance against Israeli aggression. This rhetoric resonated with many in the region, bolstering his image as a strong and determined leader. But behind his talk, his government is built on fear and harsh rules. The Mukhabarat, Syria's notorious secret police, kept a tight grip on the population. Surveillance was widespread, and dissent was brutally crushed. The atmosphere of fear ensured that few dared to challenge Assad's authority. Assad's takeover is a big change for Syria. The country, which had experienced numerous coups and political instability since gaining independence from France in 1946, now had a leader who was determined to bring about stability, albeit through authoritarian means. The country, which has had lots of political problems since it became independent, is now ruled by a very strict leader. Assad's governance style was characterized by a mix of repression and strategic alliances. He sought to modernize the country while maintaining tight control over its political and social structures. The Mukhabarat, the government's secret police, scare people into silence. Their presence was felt in every aspect of Syrian life, from schools to workplaces. The fear of being reported and punished kept the population in check, ensuring that Assad's rule remained unchallenged. Assad's Syria becomes important in the complicated politics of the Middle East. His regime played a crucial role in regional dynamics, aligning with the Soviet Union during the Cold War and positioning itself as a key player in Arab politics. Assad's strategic alliances and his stance against Israel made Syria a significant force in the region. This is the start of a family ruling Syria for many years. Hafez al-Assad's legacy would be carried on by his son, Bashar al-Assad, who took over the presidency after his father's death in 2000. The Assad family's rule has been marked by both continuity and change, but the foundations laid by Hafez in the 1970s have remained a defining feature of Syrian politics. Hafez al-Assad, the once unknown Air Force officer, is now the powerful leader of Syria. His rise to power is a testament to his strategic mind and ruthless determination. Under his rule, Syria would undergo significant changes, both domestically and in its role on the international stage. The impact of his leadership continues to be felt in the country and the region to this day. It's 1982. Something terrible happens in the Syrian city of Hama. People, led by the Muslim Brotherhood, rise up against Hafez al-Assad. Assad's brother Rifat leads the army and attacks the city. They fire bombs at homes, destroying everything. Tanks roll through the streets, stopping anyone who fights back. This becomes known as the Hama massacre. No one knows exactly how many people died. Some say 10,000, others say 40,000. The government hid what really happened. The massacre scares everyone in Syria and other Arab countries. It's a clear message: don't challenge Assad. Other countries say bad things about the massacre, but they don't do much. The Hama massacre is a key moment in Hafez al-Assad's rule. The year 2000, Hafez al-Assad dies after ruling for 30 years. His son, Bashar al-Assad, a doctor trained in England, becomes the new leader. Everyone wonders what will happen. Could this doctor bring change to Syria? At first people are hopeful. Bashar talks about changes, making things modern and even democracy. There's a time of more freedom called the Damascus Spring. Prisoners are let go. People start talking about the country's future. For a short time it looks like Syria might change, but it doesn't last. Bashar faces pushback from older leaders and stops his promised changes. The hope disappears and Syria goes back to the way it was. The early 2000s bring a mix of problems that lead to an uprising in Syria. The country, like much of the Middle East, is grappling with political and social unrest. The streets of Damascus, once bustling with life, now echo with the murmurs of discontent. People are growing increasingly frustrated with the status quo, yearning for change and a better future. Bashar al-Assad, who came to power with promises of reform, fails to deliver on his commitments. His speeches, once filled with hope, now ring hollow. The public's dissatisfaction grows as they see no real change in their daily lives. Protests against his regime become more frequent, with people demanding accountability and transparency. The government remains highly controlling, with a tight grip on every aspect of life. Surveillance and censorship are rampant, stifling any form of dissent. The presence of police and security forces is a constant reminder of the regime's power, creating an atmosphere of fear and oppression. Economic disparity is stark. While a small elite enjoys immense wealth, the majority of the population struggles to make ends meet. The contrast between affluent neighborhoods and impoverished areas is glaring, fueling resentment and anger among the people. This growing divide only adds to the mounting tensions. In 2006, a severe drought strikes Syria, exacerbating the already dire situation. Farmlands turn to dust and water sources dry up. The agricultural sector, which many depend on for their livelihood, is devastated. This environmental crisis further deepens the economic woes of the country. Crops fail, livestock perish, and rural communities face ruin. Farmers, who once thrived, now find themselves destitute. The loss of agricultural productivity forces many to abandon their homes in search of better opportunities, adding to the growing number of displaced individuals. As people migrate to urban areas, cities become overcrowded, straining already limited resources. The influx of new residents leads to increased competition for jobs, housing, and basic services. This rapid urbanization creates new social and economic challenges, further destabilizing the country. The government's response to these crises is inadequate, leaving many feeling abandoned. Public services are stretched thin and corruption is rampant. As frustrations boil over, protests become more widespread and intense. The people's anger is palpable and their calls for change grow louder. Meanwhile, the Arab Spring sweeps across the region, bringing significant political changes. In countries like Tunisia and Egypt, long-standing regimes are toppled by popular uprisings. These events inspire hope and solidarity among Syrians who see a possibility for their own liberation. In Tunisia, the self-immolation of Mohamed Bouazizi, a street vendor, ignites a revolution. His act of desperation resonates deeply, symbolizing the struggle against oppression and injustice. The Tunisian revolution becomes a catalyst for change, sparking movements across the Arab world. The Arab Spring brings a wave of hope and a desire for freedom and change. People across the region are inspired to stand up against tyranny and demand their rights. This collective yearning for a better future fuels the momentum for revolutionary movements. By 2011, Syria is on the brink of its own revolution. The combination of political repression, economic hardship, and the influence of the Arab Spring creates a perfect storm. The people are ready to rise up, demanding justice, freedom, and a new beginning for their country. March 2011. Inspired by the Arab Spring, some teenagers in Dara, Syria, write anti-government messages on a wall. This small act starts a big problem. The government reacts quickly and harshly. The teenagers are arrested, hurt, and killed. This makes people across Syria very angry and they start protesting. They want freedom, democracy, and no more corruption. The protests are peaceful at first, but the government uses violence. They shoot at unarmed people. Many are arrested, hurt, and disappear. This makes the protests even stronger. As the violence gets worse, the protests turn into a war. The Syrian civil war becomes very complicated. What started as a series of protests against the government quickly escalated into a full-blown conflict. The initial clashes between the Syrian government forces and the opposition groups soon drew the attention of the international community. Other countries get involved, making things worse. Nations from around the world began to take sides, each with their own interests and agendas. This external involvement added layers of complexity to an already chaotic situation. Iran wants to protect Bashar al-Assad and keep its power in the area, so it helps Assad's army. Iran's support includes not just military aid but also strategic advice and training for Syrian forces. This alliance is crucial for Assad's survival. Hezbollah, a group from Lebanon, also sends fighters to help Assad. Hezbollah's involvement is driven by its own regional ambitions and its close ties with Iran. Their fighters are experienced and play a significant role in key battles. Other countries like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar help different groups fighting against Assad. Each of these nations has its own reasons for getting involved, ranging from regional influence to sectarian interests. Their support includes funding, weapons, and sometimes direct military intervention. The United States says Assad should leave but only gives a little help to some rebel groups. The US is cautious, wary of getting too deeply involved in another Middle Eastern conflict. Their limited support is aimed at balancing power without committing to a full-scale intervention. Then, extremist groups like ISIS join the war and take over land. The rise of ISIS adds a new and terrifying dimension to the conflict. Their brutal tactics and rapid territorial gains create a humanitarian crisis and draw global condemnation. Many fighters and weapons come from other countries, making the Syrian war even more complicated and dangerous. The influx of foreign fighters and smuggled arms turns Syria into a battleground for various international interests, further destabilizing the region. No one is winning, and other countries can't agree on how to stop the fighting. Despite numerous diplomatic efforts and peace talks, a resolution remains elusive. The war drags on, causing immense suffering and displacement for millions of Syrians. The Syrian civil war creates a huge disaster. Millions of people have to leave their homes. It's one of the worst refugee crises ever. Many more people move to safer places inside Syria. The war destroys buildings, jobs, and families. People suffer terribly. Hospitals and schools are bombed, people are killed and hurt. The Assad government even uses chemical weapons on its own people. Other countries try to help, but the problems are too big. The war hurts Syria's economy, healthcare, and schools, and the problems will last for a long time. It's 2024. After more than 10 years of war, things change dramatically in Syria. Assad's power, helped by Russia and Iran, starts to weaken. Rebel groups working together as the Syrian National Army attack Assad's areas. Russia is busy with its war in Ukraine and has problems at home, so it stops helping Assad as much. Iran also has problems and sends less money and help. Assad is alone and losing power. The rebel groups get stronger and take over important cities. Assad's army is weak and starts to fall apart. Finally, Damascus, the Assad family's center of power, is taken. Bashar al-Assad runs away, probably to Russia. After Assad is gone, Syria has to rebuild. The country is destroyed and people are divided. Millions of people want to go home but don't know what the future holds. Other countries need to help Syria. They need to send food and other things that people need. Rebuilding Syria will take a lot of money and work. But it's not just about buildings. People need to learn to trust each other again. They need a fair government. People who did bad things during the war, like using chemical weapons, need to be punished. Rebuilding Syria will be hard and take a long time. Other countries need to help the Syrian people find peace and a better future.